grade mathematicians. I'm here to help you get ready for your pre-AP math test. It's going to be covering everything that we've covered this week. That means you're going to have some questions on ratios, on unit rates. You also have questions on percents, on finding parts of wholes, and on constant of proportionality. So the first thing that I want to look over is on some questions involving ratios and rates. This is actually a unit rate question. And in this question, we might have something like, say, I have 2 out of 20. And I want to know, well, if I have 2 out of 20, what would I have out of 510? At first glance, this looks like a pretty rough question. Now, you could solve it the way we've been doing percentages, and you could put the x over here, and you could cross multiply. But there's a much easier way to do this, because I can see that I can easily make this into a unit rate so that it's simpler to work out in. And I could say, well, 2 over 20 is the same thing as 1 over 10. Once I have 1 over 10, then it's really easy to change that into 510, because I know that 51 times 10 is 510. So my answer would be 51 over 510. You're going to see some questions where you might have a very simple proportion where you're just going to move from one to another very easily with math that you recognize. You may have some that you may need to take to a unit rate first, and once you have your unit rate, it'll be easier to work. Okay guys, I'm looking at your test here, and I can see that you also have several different questions that deal with constant and proportionality. And these kind of questions look a lot like questions that you probably are used to seeing in 4th and 5th grade. Questions like, I drove 310 miles in 7 hours, and how many miles can I drive in 5 hours at that rate? And so it's kind of like a two-step question. First, I'd have to take my 310 and divide it by the amount of hours I went. Once again, put it into a unit rate. And once I know how many miles per hour I'm going, then it's very easy to know how many miles I'm going to drive in the new amount of hours that it wants to check. So I have a question like that. I have one that wants to change it into different miles, and then I will have one that just wants to know what the constant of proportionality is. And remember, the constant of proportionality means that's just what is our miles per hour. If I go 100 miles in 2 hours, my constant of proportionality would be 50, because 100 divided by 2 is 50. It's pretty simple if you don't try to make it too hard. So you have a couple different questions. One's talking about a recipe with proportionality. One's talking about mileage with proportionality. You're also going to have a question that shows a table. It's talking about some shapes and looking at lengths and perimeters and comparing them. It doesn't really matter what you're comparing. You could be comparing cupcakes to brownies. What you're really concerned about is looking at your ratios, and you're just looking for that constant proportionality. Remember, that is just like the y equals ax pattern. You want to know what you're multiplying times in order to get your new number, like an input-output table. Okay, this is another kind of a constant proportionality question. You have a regular price of something. Say I can usually buy the big 2 liters of soda for $3 for $5, but this week they're on sale 4 for $5, and I have $25 to spend. I want to know how many more I can get when it's 4 for $5 than I can for 3 for $5. So it's pretty basic, pretty easy. It's just like setting up your ratios. You can say, well, 3 for 5 equals what for 25? And 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3 is 15. So I know that I can get 15 for $25 on my regular days. And then I would say, well, really all I did was I just took my 5, since I know 5 is 25. 5 times 5 is 25. So I just took 5 times 3. I can do the same thing with this one and just take 4 times 5, and that's 20. So I can get 5 more when they're on sale than I can get when they're not on sale. There's a couple different ways you can work that problem, but that one is a really easy way to work it. It's probably something you won't have to think too hard about. You also see a question that's something like this. In this question, I'm going to take a thing like 20 Skittles. I got a little, one of those fun-sized things of Skittles, and there was 20 of them in there, and I counted them, and I saw that there was 4 green, there was 4 red, there was 3 yellow, and there was 9 blue. And I want to know, what is my percent of blue Skittles? So this is going to be our proportionality. We're going to set this up here, and we say, well, we're looking at 100%. I don't know what my percentage is, but I know that I have 9 out of 20, and then I can just go ahead and multiply. 9 times 100 is 900, and 900 would equal 20x. And then I want to get rid of that 20, so I'm just going to divide all of that by 20. And I end up with 900 divided by 20. I'm just going to do the math. 900 divided by 20. 20 is going to go into 90 4 times. That's 80. I have 10 left. I bring down my 0 to 100. So that goes in 45 times. So that means x is going to equal 45%. You're going to have a problem that's very similar to that. It's not going to be talking about 20 of something, but it's going to talk about a number like that. That's how you set it up. It's just like we've been setting up our proportionalities all week, except this time instead of looking for the part, we're looking for the percent. All right, guys, here's another kind of question that you might see. I made a table over here, and in this imaginary world here, there's 5 teachers, 25 girls, and 10 boys, and I want to know which one of these is 25% of the total people. So what I'd have to do is first I'd have to add up all of these things, and when I add them up, I find that I have 40 of them altogether. 25% is pretty easy to find. Even though we could go ahead and set up the whole proportionality, we do know that 25% is just 1/4, right? And when multiplying times 1/4 is the same thing as dividing by its reciprocal, which would be 4. So all I have to do is take 40 divided by 4, and I can easily see that the boys are 25% of this group. You've got a pretty easy unit rate question. It's just about buying something at the store, and you want to know how much it is per item. We know that we just have to divide to find that out. You also have a circle graph. So remember, circle graph is something like this, and it's going to be divided up into sections. And that's probably not a very good circle graph. Let's do it like that. Be divided up into sections, and you're going to have to kind of figure out what percent of something is. And when I look at this, I can see that this is probably, in this very bad drawing, that's probably about 50%. And these are probably all about 1/3 of what's left, right? So if those are 50%, I have 50% here, and it's divided into pieces. This one's a little bigger. So I might guess maybe this is like 15 and 15 and 20%. And I can kind of tell by the sizes of this. So you're going to have a question that's going to ask about a percentage of something. You're just going to need to look at your graph and figure out kind of where is that going to make sense. Your last 2 questions are about average rates of things, and you're dealing with fractions. When you're dealing with fractions and you're trying to find out things like this, it might be easier to make them into decimals. So I would suggest just taking them, making them into a decimal, and it's just like all of your other unit rate proportionality questions. Okay, so this is the part of the review that you need to write something down. So this is what I'd like you to write down. These are the things that we learned this week. We talked a lot about that a part and a whole is going to equal the percent out of 100%. If you will write that down, that's going to help you get your proportionality set up correctly so you get your answers correct. You just fill in the numbers into whatever sections you have, and whatever you don't have, you make that into an X. You cross multiply, and you can find your answer. The other thing that I wanted to remind you is that unit rates are basic, just simplified ratios or simplified fractions. You're just going to simplify them down to where you get the number 1 if possible. And for a lot of our proportionality kind of questions, when we're looking for constant proportionality, we're looking basically for a unit rate. When we're looking for a multiplicative patterns, we're looking for unit rates. When we are trying to find out how many of something there is, a lot of times if you go to the unit rate first, it's going to be very simple to find your answer from there. So take your time, do good work on the test, think it through, and you're going to be fine. I think this is a week that you've done pretty well on, so I think this is something you should understand pretty good.